we come into the world and we have this, well, I'll use Gebser's model. You know, when you look at the fetus in the womb, it recapitulates the entire evolution of species on the planet. You start off as a single cell, it divides, and at times the fetus looks like sea creatures. Sometimes it looks like a reptile, sometimes it looks like a bird. So it's about the first 18 to 20 days you can watch it going through all these transformations. It literally doesn't look like human at all. And so we see this model being recapitulated. And as a side note, what they call junk DNA, from my investigation, is our genetic history as souls evolving through the entire kingdom of nature. Yogananda says in his teachings it takes about 6 billion reincarnations through nature, the kingdom of nature, to get your first human body. So I believe that the junk DNA is actually the genetic code because we're built out of all that. We are made out of all that. We're sort of like the evolutionary tip of the sword of nature on this planet. And so in Gebser's model, that sort of proto-human existence is the archaic level of consciousness. And then you go from there into the magic level of consciousness, which relates to the period of time in which we were living in a fusion with nature. And the magic level of consciousness is very, very shamanic. For example, if you investigate how it is that shaman figured out how to make ayahuasca, or how they knew which plants to use for healing ceremonies or psychedelic ceremonies, or how medicine men knew how to combine different herbs. I mean, thousands of years ago, there wasn't any, pharmacist to go to. They'll all say the same thing. The plants taught me. So what you find out is because we have all these genes in us, when we direct our consciousness to a plant or to a creature or to a stone, we go into sympathetic resonance with it. And that frequency of consciousness that is broadcasting out everything on the planet has an aura, even a stone. So it's sending out subtle energy and we're receiving it. And so we're actually going into sympathetic resonance. And because we have all those genes inside of us, our soul takes that information and converts it into thoughts in our own mind that guide us. So the magic level of consciousness is very, very important. And interestingly, Gebser noted that when he looked at rock art and cave art from that period, which is, 80, 100,000 years ago and before, you did not see mouths on human beings. They drew human beings with no mouths. And so the conclusion is that it was much more important to listen to survive in nature than it was to speak. And so what is it when we're talking to God? It's mostly listening. What is it when you're a mother who's got a child that cannot yet speak, but you sense that it needs something? It's a deep listening. When I am building things out of stone, I connect to the stones and I ask my soul to link me up to the consciousness, and they guide me. And people think I'm weird, but it's just because they've lost touch with magic level of consciousness. I've made countless plant medicines. I'm an alchemist. I use this level of consciousness all the time. I talk to the plants in my house and they guide me and tell me things. They tell me when they're thirsty or when they need more fertilizer. I talk to trees. I've taught thousands of students to do this. I've done countless times. I've taken patients, for example, to Paramahansa Yogananda's Encinitas temple, right on the beach there, the Encinitas, where he's got this beautiful botanical garden with, wildly vast plants from trees from all over the world. I say, okay, you've got, say, adrenal fatigue. Let's go to Yogananda's garden here. I'm going to have you touch this plant, and I want you to just empty yourself and feel what it's doing to your body. And you're going to find one or more of these plants is actually going to put an energy into you that's actually going to make you feel more whole, more stable. And you'll see things like headaches disappearing, like breathing all of a sudden freeing up, small intestine challenges, all of a sudden the guts relax. And so you'll find, first of all, that the plants are very, very conscious of us, and they actually feel sorry for us. They're like, I'll tell you an example of this magic consciousness. I was one time taking JP Sears actually out for a hike in the hills behind our house in Vista, which had like a 5-mile, a big area that you couldn't build on it. So it was like a nature preserve. And I just had the urge to say hello to, all the plant life there. So I grabbed a hold of one of the shrubs and just said hello. I just wanted to say thank you for all the love and all the beauty you give us all. And the plant said to me, wow, it's so nice to talk to somebody who is awake. Where are all the rest of you? And I said, what do you mean by the rest of us? They said, well, a while back, all the people that lived here talked to us all the time. And I said, oh, are you talking about the Indians that used to live here? They said, yes, they moved through here, they lived here, and they talked to us all the time. And now nobody talks to us. And so I, explained in brief, this is what happened to human beings. And they say, well, that must be why they keep wanting to kill us, because they didn't used to do that to us. We used to have relationships with them. So there is an example of the plant kingdom saying to a human being, where are the rest of you that can talk to us? And, why are you so brutal to all of us? And so here we are going from the archaic level, which is sort of the evolution of man, to become to the point where it actually is aware that it's aware. Homo sapiens sapiens, I'm aware that I'm aware kind of thing. And then we get to this fusion in nature where we have to listen to survive. And then we go to the mythic level, and that's when mouths started showing up on ancient art and cave art. And that's the beginning of telling stories to each other to try to explain the mysteries of life, like what is lightning? Why are all of a sudden the earth is shaking and things are falling down? Why do we see these strange things happening in the sky? Why is the sun this amazing bright thing that seems to have these cycles? And why does the moon seem to affect so much on the planet? So myths were really attempts to explain the unexplainable, and myths were also codes of how to understand the process from birth to childhood, to adulthood, to old age, and understand death. And so all the myths were actually taught by the elders to the younger people to help them understand the process you're going to be going through as a human being. Myths dealt with proprietaries and improprietaries, because without that understanding, you would cease to exist. You'd either kill each other off, or you would act in ways towards other people that would make them want to kill you. The myths had to create a sense of magic, mystery, and awe for the experience of life, or you would start destroying it. So myths actually became ways that we tried to communicate with these forces, which we gave the names of gods because we didn't know how else to relate to them. And they were stories that told us what was happening, and stories about how to live life and what would happen if you did certain things. For example, if you capture somebody in a war, what are you allowed to do and not do? And they were very aware that if you went too far, then they would do that to you if they captured you. So there was these, shall we say, moral codes of conduct, moral being a code of conduct that's life affirmative, versus an ethic, which is a code of conduct that may not be life affirmative. As a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division, I had a soldier's manual, about 490 pages of all the things that you do in battle, and what the enemy looks like, and what their weapons look like, and what you do and do not do if you capture an enemy. That's an ethical code, but it's really a myth, right? And so then we emerge to the mental level, which is what we're trapped in now, but coming out of. And in the mental level, you begin to worship ideas as more powerful than anything else. And it's a very dangerous level, because you begin to deify ideas whether or not they're congruent with reality. And so here you see, for example, we're falling in love with virtual realities. And that's causing a real problem, because the further you go into an additional virtual reality, the less time and awareness you put into the one that keeps you alive, which is why I define reality two ways. Reality is what's happening right now. This is reality. But reality is also everything that supports your ability to stay alive. So to the degree that you get trapped in the mental world and you start worshiping ideas that are antagonistic to paying attention to what keeps you alive, you can die death by ideas. And this is exactly where we're at right now. In Gebser's model, the final stage is the integral stage, which we're coming into right now. And he talks about the fact that when the integral stage comes on, it can be quite disorienting. He describes the fact that time takes on different natures, that there can be convergent timelines all happening at once. He says reality becomes diaphanous, which means see-through, opaque, like you can see through it into other dimensions. And we have a lot of people experiencing that. And we're in our third big wave of psychedelic use, which makes people much more aware that we're in a multidimensional reality. But in the integral age, when we finally get out of the mental, we will merge into this awareness that we are multidimensional beings. And we will see the alchemist model was very real. And we will be able to identify, wow, we really got lost in that materialism. We almost wiped ourselves out because we forgot about everything that was important. We forgot everything is spirit, cloaking itself in matter. And that matter itself is spirit. And we lost touch with what Ken Wilber would call the interiors, or the upper left personal interior and the lower left collective interior dimensions, which is the dimension of soul and spirit, for God's sakes, which is what the magical level was all about, right? There you were very in your interior dimension, and everything in the world was alive. It was animated, right? So there's where you have animism comes from that. They realized that a tree was not just a bunch of wood. It was a living being. It was a spirit in there, and it was intelligent. You know, it made things for you to eat. It housed insects and birds, and it was a home. And it was, you know, there was a point where people thought trees were God in the history of people's beliefs about God because they saw that life couldn't exist without trees. So once we get into this integral level, we really actually have the ability to see how all the puzzle pieces fit together. And it's like, oh my God. And you realize, wow, I've really made some mistakes along the way here. The question is, are we going to destroy ourselves before we get there? And it's a very big software upgrade. I mean, most people have a hard time dealing with a material reality, like paying their bills, eating real food, raising their kids. So, you know, you plug somebody into an integral level. It's kind of like being on, 10 grams of mushrooms where, you're intersecting with all these realities, and it's kind of hard to balance your checkbook and drive your car. But one of the points I want to make in this regard is that all the experts from Arthur M. Young to Gene Gebser to Houston Smith to Joseph Campbell to Carl Jung to Ken Wilber and a long list of them all recognize something fundamental. For you to effectively grow in consciousness, you must not only transcend, but you must include. And that's the problem we have, because we have most of the world population at the mental level of consciousness where it worships ideas as though they're gods. And what is religions but a bunch of ideas, right? So until you have a religious experience, you're just memorizing stuff written on a piece of paper by somebody else and thinking it's God, which is, God thinks this is tremendously hilarious because God's got all the time in the, universe. So God says, hey, let's get lost together and have some fun, And so when you get to the mental level and you forget our developmental history and that the world is the very fabric from which we get our sense of self from. It's where our body comes from. It's place. I mean, what story can you act out without place, right? You can't act out a myth. You can't live a myth without place. So if you forget about the archaic level, you forget about the importance of the soil. You forget about the importance of the microorganism. You forget about the importance of and the nature of water. You forget about the sacredness of the sky and of breathing. If you forget about the mythic level, well, what do scientific materialist left brain people call a myth? They now think it's a lie. So myths are equal to lies. So what happens is you overlook the deepest, most powerful, most important stories that tell you things that you cannot grasp with a left brain approach. You have to be able to have the same capacity to understand myth that you have to read poetry. And I could go deep into that, but to keep it simple, so we have now got to the point where we don't understand the deeper meanings of the stories that have been told for as long as human beings have been on the planet. And all of them are telling us about reality. Marci Eliade, one of the greatest teachers on myth and world religion and shamanism, makes the point, all myths are true. And now that's hard for a lot of people to grasp, but a myth is something that's never true, but always will be. A myth is something that is never true, but always will be, right? And I'll give you an example. You're an individual, and your thoughts are completely your own, and you're going to die, and it's going to be screened to black because you're really just an animal walking around, right? So that's never true, but it always will be. There's some element of truth to that, but there's also an element of it that's not true. Now, if I said that to you as a poem and said, read between the lines, you would probably say something like, God likes to play hide and go seek. And I would say, you got it. But if you don't have the capacity for abstract thinking, because you're still stuck in the child archetype, and you're still caught in belief systems that stop you from seeing the metaphor, the analogy, or the poetry.
Hold the paradox.
Or the paradox. Osho says you can never understand God until you can handle a paradox, and it's very true. Then you get yourself into trouble. So you see, we have transcended but not included myth. So now but isn't it funny that we love Harry Potter and we love movies and we love James Bond and we love all these things, but we actually forgot about the most important stories there are. And many of those stories are telling you about the inherent relationship you must have with the earth and with the elements, or you will cease to exist as we can exist here. So we've transcended but not included the archaic. We're destroying the planet. We've transcended the mythic and not included it. And so we don't understand the real stories anymore. And we keep telling stories that are used to sell you stuff that you don't need and kill each other with it. Then we are at the mental level. And if we go into the integral level and we don't carry those three other levels, we will never be integral, because you cannot be integrated without all those things. So here's sort of a punchline to all this. When the integral age is coming on like it is right now, to the degree that you do not understand the inherent nature of the earth and the inherent nature of our biological existence, or biology as it exists, to the degree that you do not understand myth and cannot not only interpret story, but realize that you are yourself a myth, and that is very important. Know thyself. There's a myth for you.
Yeah, often unaware of the myth that's moving through us.
Yes. Okay, so when the integral age comes on and these dimensions start to open up, to the degree that you are, shall we say, carrying blind spots, it's going to be like you're in a rapid download, but you're running such old, outdated software that it will collapse the computer, as an analogy.
As Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
Yes, exactly. He says, until you meet the unconscious will meet you on the outside in the events of your life, until you meet it on the inside, and you will call it fate. It'll meet you on the outside in the events of your life, and you will call it fate. In other words, you'll always think shit's happening to you, instead of realizing you're actually generating this by being unconscious. And so that's when I say the pain teacher comes to wake you up, right?